Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for Pink Fresh Studio. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing this gorgeous, what I'm calling wedding card, but it could really be any kind of celebration. And I am featuring the new Delighted For You press plate. Now here's a look at the stamp set. The focal point of the coordinating press plate that I'll be using today is the exact same image. And I'm going to be using this for hot foiling today, but keep in mind, you could always use the stamp and do some heat embossing. I'm also going to be using the diagonal plaid press plate, and I'm going to be using it with just one turn. And finally, the Joyful Day press plate. I'm doing a lot of press plate today. But keep in mind, you could make a lot of these elements with just the stamp set if that is more your jam. So I'm going to be using the matte silver foil as well as some white foil in today's project. So I'm going to get that cut to the sizes that I need. This opaque white foil is really cool, and I'm going to be using that to create a striped background onto some colored cardstock using some hot foiling techniques. But what I really wanted to show you today was how to ink blend white florals. So I am going to kind of walk you through the colors that I use, but first, before we do that, I need to go ahead and hot foil these images. So I'm placing the press plates on my glimmer platform with the pattern side facing up. You can see I also have the Celebrate sentiment. That's from the Joyful Day press plate set. And I allowed my platform to run through its timer, and once the timer had run down, I went ahead and removed the platform from the base, took it over to my Platinum 6. I added my foil with the pretty side facing down towards the press plate pattern. Then I added some smooth white cardstock, the 2 shims that come with the Glimmer hot foil system, and then I just ran that through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and you can see I have beautiful foiled results there. Now I'm also going to be foiling these leaf images onto some vellum cardstock. So I am placing the plate again onto the platform of the Glimmer system. I am allowing that timer to run down, and I am going to remove the platform from the base once the timer has gone through its whole shebang. And then I'll take it over to my Platinum 6 and add my foil with the pretty side facing down. I'm going to add my vellum, and then I'm going to add my 2 shims on top of it. But this time I am going to add a piece of 80-pound cardstock between the 2 shims. This is just going to give me a little more pressure on that vellum. I found that I needed a little extra pressure for this particular vellum in order to get a clean image. Now, once I've run that through, I'm going to show you the results here. They're absolutely beautiful. I love hot foiling on vellum. You may have to experiment a little bit with your particular vellum to see what kind of heat and pressure you need, but I find that adding just that thin shim helped get great results on this particular vellum. Now, finally, I am going to do my background, and this is the diagonal plaid press plate. I've placed it onto the platform of my Glimmer, and I'm allowing it to run through its timer process. And then I'm going to remove the platform from the base and take it over to my Platinum 6. And I'm going to add this opaque white foil with the pretty side facing towards the press plate. Then I'm going to grab some of this Barely Peach cardstock and place that on top. And then I'm going to grab my shims and run this through. Now, I'm going to be honest, I did not get the greatest foiled impression on this particular image, and I attribute that to 2 things. Number 1, I'm using a cardstock that's not perfectly smooth. When I foil onto white cardstock, I make sure that I have a really smooth white cardstock, and this particular cardstock is not the smoothest cardstock in the world. The other thing that I attribute that to is that I think this press plate needed just a little more time to heat up, and I think I would have gotten a little bit better results, but I'm going to be trimming that down, so I'm not super worried about that. For now, I want to go ahead and start ink blending this beautiful lily image that's featured in the Delighted For You press plate set and coordinating stamp set. And for the stencil set, the first stencil is actually like the most solid part of these florals, and I went ahead and skipped that. And that's because I really want my florals to be white. So we're going to take some real care in making sure that we don't overblend our colors that we're using. Now, stencil number 2 is the most solid portion of the leaves, so I'm going to start by blending all over with olive and a large blending brush, and then I switched to my 1/2-inch blending brush and added just a little more intensity towards the base of those leaves. Now I'm moving on to stencil number 3, which is the flower centers, and I'm using sweet mustard with a 1/2-inch blending brush, and then I'm using dough with a 1/4-inch blending brush just to give a little bit of kind of neutrality to this yellow in the center of those florals. Now here is stencil number 4, and this starts blending in the details of the flowers. And I am starting with the fresh pear, and I'm just barely blending around the centers of the flowers with that, just bringing it out a little. And then I came in with some Misty Coast just on the tips of those. So keep in mind, I'm not filling up the entire stencil area with ink for this particular stencil because I just want a light coating of ink just to give some shadows. Now for the details on the leaves, I'm using Lush Forest and blending that in. And then I like to wipe off my stencils before I remove them. Then I went ahead and I went back to stencil number 1. Now this is the most open area stencil for the floral. And I'm using a tad bit of lemon whip around the centers of those. And then I'm coming in with the Misty Coast again, just on the tips of the petals. I am not adding ink over the entire stencil. Once again, just adding it at the tips. And you can see I'm kind of pulling up my stencil to make sure that I'm not getting too much ink. I don't want a gray flower, but I do need some kind of shading in there. And look at the beautiful results I got. So just by concentrating the ink blending towards the center of the florals and on the very tips of the petal, I got a beautiful white floral image. Now I had Googled white lilies before I started my ink blending, and I kind of had this picture off to the side. And you'll notice there's some like yellow dots in this flower. Now, I kind of regret this part. I'm not gonna lie. And in my craft room lighting, this looked okay, but when I took it out to natural light to take the photos, I really felt like this stood out so much. And it just kind of jumps out like these yellow freckles. So I added some like little yellow dots to try to copy that image, and I probably should have just left it alone. I don't know. You can tell me what you think. Do you like the little yellow details, or would you have skipped those? My feelings won't be hurt. I still think the ink blending turned out beautiful, but if I could go back, I would probably not do those yellow dots. And I have since kind of faded them out by blending over the top of them with a little bit of white pencil, white colored pencil that just kind of softened the color. And I took the photo before I blended over them with the white colored pencil. Anyway, now we're going to move on to die cutting all of these fabulous images that we've hot foiled. So I've die cut the floral image there as well as the sentiment. I've die cut these beautiful foiled vellum leaves. And for today's card, I pulled out an oldie but goodie. This is the Mini Slimline Essentials. It's actually part of the Mini Slimline Essentials. I'm going to make a Mini Slimline card today. And this is for a wedding that I need to go to this weekend. So I thought it would be the perfect size to hide some cash in there. I'm going to die cut the smallest of the layers from this background here that I did with the white foil. And that's just going to give me a soft pattern, kind of a backdrop for my card. Now I used the diagonal stitched layer to die cut some matte silver cardstock, and I'm going to do quite a few layers on this card just to give it a dressier look. And I finished off by die cutting the largest rectangle from a piece of that Barely Peach cardstock. This particular piece of Barely Peach does not have the white diagonal lines on it because I didn't want to try to line those up. So I'm going to stack all this up, but first I need to make my card base. And I thought I would remind you how to make a mini slimline card base. I have my piece of white cardstock here. This actually happens to be a linen piece of cardstock. And I'm cutting it at 6.5 inches by 6.25 inches. Then I'm going to take it and along that 6.5 inch side, I'm going to score at 3.25 inches. So the finished card size is going to be 3.25 by 6.25 inches, and that's going to fit my layers perfectly. So again, you're going to cut it to 6.5 by 6.25 and score along the longer side at 3.25 inches. Now I did die cut a couple of plain white cardstock layers from that Delighted For You die to kind of give my floral piece a little bit of heft and some weight and dimension on the front of my card. So I went ahead and added some liquid glue to this beautiful ink blended piece, and I'm going to stack 2 plain layer die cuts behind it. And then I am going to start assembling my card. And I did want to note that I did stack up my sentiment as well. I added 3 plain white die cut pieces behind that Celebrate sentiment to give it a little bit of heft and weight on the card as well. So I'm just getting this all stacked up here. You can see I add the liquid glue and then I place it on top of the other cardstock layer. And I just kind of use my fingers to make sure that everything gets aligned correctly. You can see me kind of pinching at the edge of that cardstock, and that gives me great alignment. Now I'm going to take my first layer and I'm going to layer it up using some tape runner adhesive. So I have some tape runner on the back of that stripe piece, and I'm layering it on top of that stitched silver piece there. Then I am going to add some tape runner to the back of this layer, and I'm going to add it to the top of that largest layer there. And I think that that little silver, thin silver frame that's showing between those 2 layers just really dresses this card up a lot. And it really, this card overall feels very wedding-y, but this could also be a great anniversary card as well. So now that I have my layers figured out, I am going to go ahead and grab these vellum leaves, and I'm holding them in place and just sneaking the fine tip of my glue bottle underneath those. I didn't want to move them once I had them where I wanted them, because you know how that goes. You never get it back in the right place. And once I get that kind of glued down, I'll add my sentiment onto a banner layer that I die cut with the basic banners. So I'm just adding some liquid glue, and I did add this on my card and on the banner at a little bit of an angle just to add some interest. Everything was so like straight up and down and stripes. I just really felt like it needed something that was kind of breaking out of the lines of all the straight lines. So I'll add my floral piece onto the side of this card here just with some liquid glue again. And then for my sentiment banner, I went ahead and added a thin strip of foam adhesive behind that, and I'm going to adhere that right over the top of this focal layer again, just at an angle to add a little bit of interest to that. Now I really went back and forth as to whether I should add some foam adhesive behind this entire layer, and guess what? Foam adhesive won. I always love a little extra dimension on my cards, but you could absolutely skip the dimension, especially if this is something that you're mailing. So I added that entire card front onto my card base with foam adhesive, and then I finished the card off with some of these clear droplets. Now these have been one of my favorite embellishments recently from Pink Fresh Studio. It's just such a simple and classic embellishment that adds a little bit of shine, but doesn't kind of detract from what's going on overall. So here is a look at my finished mini slimline wedding card. I think the happy couple is going to love it. And I really hope you enjoyed seeing this card come together, as well as the tips on blending white floral images. Now, as always, I will have links to the featured products used in this project in the description at YouTube. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. And don't forget to let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed those yellow dot details or if that's something you might have skipped. As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on this YouTube channel so you don't miss any of the paper crafting and card making video tutorials shared here. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.